So let's say you're still not really very satisfied with those black and white images because they're still hand painted. And let's say you would like them to be more clean or crisp. Uh, that is something we can do inside an external application. And there are two things maybe we have to do. So here I switch to the view mode. And oh, sorry, I forgot to do this. Also here, I go to edit mode. And then you see inside the UV editor, right now I see the image. See, it's called UV and image editor. So I can see and work on the image. If I go into edit mode, I can work with the UV. And this UV layout, I can actually export. So I click export UV layout, go to my desktop. Actually, I save it here inside my folder UV layout. If I scroll down, you will see it's a PNG image, the same 1000 pixels. That's fine. I do not want to have a fill opacity and export UV layout. If you click this, then Blender will create an image there, which is transparent, and your wire mesh, the UV layout, will be drawn as black lines. And this can be very, very helpful when, for example, in addition, I save now this image. And this is, for example, material separation photo. That's fine. And I'm going to my favorite quick image editor, Pixelmator. I do not have Adobe on this computer, so I can't show you it with the screen recording. So when I now open this UV layout, there you see there is my wire mesh, and this is kind of like also the image, and you see there it's everything else is transparent. Rule number one, two things. You do not want to move this one to somewhere else and start painting, because it will not line up with the way how it looks in Blender. Rule number two, very, very important. You do not want to change, for example, the size of your image or the proportions, because again, everything will be scratched and distorted, and you need to keep the same aspect ratio of your image. But once you know that, it's not a big deal. Okay, so here's my UV layout, and here's my material separation. Now I can actually drag this one in or import it. Maybe put this one below. I'm going to make this one less transparent. So you see, for example, where this image is. So the reason why I brought in each is in Blender I already painted roughly where I would like those lines to be. And that is where I can use this material separation image. But at the same time, having the wire mesh also gives me, to a certain degree, a good indicator where parts, for example, will be. So for example, if I go into Blender and zoom in, you can see, for example, here is this one line. And the front part here, it actually goes up. And maybe I would like it to follow just this line. So you see, for example, here how it goes up, but this is the mesh line where I would like my material to follow. So what I can do now is I can use the pen tool, and like in Photoshop or in Illustrator, start drawing, for example, a new outline. and I'm doing it this way here. Should be no fill, and actually make it red so you can see it better. Let me zoom in a little bit. I double click those lines so I can actually adjust those better. And then I will try to match, for example, my pen tool so that it actually follows better the curve or the curvature. So you can either use what you have painted as a reference or like a helper to get an orientation, or like what I did or what I'm doing here. I use both at the same time, knowing to where I can put paint down and where, for example, I shouldn't. Okay, so this, for example, I would like it to be filled white. No outline, and I turn everything off. Perfect. I will create a new layer in my case, and this layer actually I'm going to fill black. There. Perfect. So this, for example, right now I export and save as my original material separation photo 2. So I'm overriding that image. I'm replacing it. And it's all cool. Because here, I think if I click reload image, see, it reloaded it. So it replaced my original in Blender created drawing with the image I cleaned up inside Pixelmator. And now you see this, for example, is much nicer and really crisper. The curved one here is actually, that's actually okay. That's quite sufficient. And again, you know, precision is great, but you can be very precise, but you don't necessarily then add really more to the storyboarding. Think about like what we're doing here is storyboarding. You explore, explain concepts. It should not look too rough or undefined, but at one point it will look so defined that more work in the stage is not necessarily leading to a better design. So maybe this corner here, I feel like can be rounded a little bit. So I could go back to here. And I think it's this one here. So I have to just soften this a little bit. Let's turn this one on so I can see better more where I'm working. Maybe like this and this. And then file, export. And I'm sorry that I'm using Pixelmator here, but I assume you're familiar with Illustrator or Photoshop. You see, Pixelmator is pretty much like Photoshop to a certain degree, so you can do it all in Photoshop as well. You just, like I do, have to work with vector forms. Otherwise, you can all do it in Illustrator. And I think in Illustrator, it is really export, and in Photoshop, it is save as to go to the PNG file dialog. So I'm going to overwrite this image again, replace, and then reload image. This maybe was too round. So, but you get the idea of what I'm doing here. So yeah, so that's basically the way how you could then bring those images or those masks you paint in Blender, if you need to, into an external program, with utilizing also your UV layout, so that actually inside those external programs, you really have a pretty decent representation of what and how you should paint here. So when you bring it back into Blender, it will fit perfectly.